Today's webinar is titled Digital Self-Defense, Tips, Tools, and Best Practices to Stay Safe Online. Our presenter today is Ben Woelk, Program Manager for the Information Security Office at RIT, where he's developed a leading information security awareness program. Ben is a member and former co-chair of the EDUCAUSE Internet 2 Security Awareness and Training Working Group of the Higher Education Information Security Council. He is also former Director and Community Affairs Committee Chair for the Society for Technical Communication and is the current Scholarship Committee Chair. Ben is a certified Information Systems Security Professional, a certified Professional Technical Communicator, and Accredited Trainer, and is an ITIL version 3 certified. He holds degrees from the University of Florida, Trinity International University, and the University of Rochester, and an advanced certificate in technical information design from RIT. Ben is also adjunct faculty here at the university, teaching classroom and online courses in computing, security fundamentals, and technical communication. Prior to joining RIT, Ben provided technical communication and change management consulting to a number of area Fortune 500 companies. His current interests include working with other security awareness practitioners to develop effective security awareness programs and providing mentoring and coaching to new and aspiring introverted leaders, and speaking and presenting workshops on introverted leadership, creating security awareness programs, and technical communication. Thank you for joining us today, Ben. This is your second time back with us, and we're thrilled to have you. Let's get going.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's a rather daunting introduction, but we'll move on past that. So today we're going to talk about digital self-defense, and digital self-defense is what we have branded our security awareness program here at RIT. And this is a slight variation on a in-person class that we provide to staff probably 5 or 6 times a year. So we're gonna save the questions to the end, but we'll have a couple of times for interactivity through the presentation. So we're going to start with a cartoon. And the cartoon, I'll read it for you, but it has data security as the announcement of what the event is. In this corner, we have firewalls, encryption, antivirus software, et cetera. And in this corner, we have Dave. So I apologize to the Daves that may be on the call. But in general, what this cartoon is telling us is that it doesn't really seem to matter what technical controls we have in place or what we do to try to protect other people or even ourselves, because we all manage to make a mistake at some point or other. And we're also faced typically human adversaries, and they are very creative and they will find new ways to attack us as well. So I'm going to postulate that you all are targets, every single one of us. Why don't you take a minute to enter your ideas into the chat about why you think that you personally might be a target, and we'll share some of those ideas. So we're getting a good variety of responses. A lot of it honestly just seems to come down to the fact that we're online and that we're vulnerable and that we do a lot of shopping and other types of things where we may put our identity at risk. So this is a word cloud. It's not one I put together, so when people ask me about specific things and they're like bogeys, I really don't have a good answer for what they meant by that. But the idea here is to give you an idea of all the possibilities that why you might be attacked and why you're a target again. So basically, it doesn't matter if you have $1 million in your bank account. It doesn't matter if you have $1,000 or less in your bank account. You are still going to be targeted by online scams of some kind or other because they have good return on their investment. So another thing to enter into the chat here. This is prefacing a little bit of research that I'm going to share in one slide. It's not a bunch of research. But Google did some research a couple of years ago. They published it, I think, in the summer of 2015. And what they did is they interviewed security experts who had ideas of what people should do to stay safe online, but they also interviewed normal people. And for the sake of the call today, we'll assume everyone listening to the call is normal. But what the question I have for you all is, what would you tell someone to do to stay safe online? What are the biggest things they need to do? And again, you can enter your recommendations into the chat on that as well. And there are no really wrong answers with this, but then again, I haven't seen what you all are putting in the chat yet. So looks like most of what we've got up here so far have to do with passwords and what they call authentication. However, the last one, keeping your operating system and BIOS up to date, this is only the second time I've presented this in the last 3 years or since that research came out where anybody's actually come up with that answer. So congratulations on that, because from the security expert's view, that's the most important thing you need to do, is actually to install your software updates. My computing security students never give that as one of the things that you should do to stay safe online. So given that the students who plan to become experts on this and normal people don't normally answer this question this way, it tells us that there's a real gap in terms of communicating what people really need to do to stay safe online. Now, the reason that it's so important to install software updates is because what will typically happen is that someone will discover a vulnerability or a way to exploit or break into a program. I mean, they're all built of millions of lines of code, and all it takes is a little error or something that when the program was developed wasn't a problem that could be now. So what happens with the software updates is that the vendors, whether it's Adobe or Microsoft or someone else, they release these patches or software updates, and this addresses those holes or vulnerabilities or weaknesses. And they've said that that's really the most important thing to do. Now, looking at the rest of the list, you can see on the non-experts top online safety practices, which we're assuming are most of the people who've contributed here, use antivirus software is the first thing on the list. The other things on there are primarily about, a couple of them about passwords. There's one about only visiting websites they know. That makes for a very small internet and may be safe, but I think it kind of ruins the experience. And to not share personal information, which makes perfect sense. On the right side, the security experts' top online safety practices, most of those are around passwords. 4 of those are around passwords of some type, and we'll talk about these things. And the other ones install software updates. But what's interesting is that the using antivirus software is not on that list of the top 5 things that the experts think you should do. And we still have a requirement for doing that at RIT, and you should still have it. But I think part of the issue here is that people may assume that having antivirus software protects them completely, while on a typical day it might recognize 65% or 80% of the different threats that are out there. So it doesn't really provide the level of protection that we might expect. It was a really interesting survey, and the results, came in kind of surprisingly. So in terms of protecting your computer and information, the links on this slide are to resources here at RIT and what the Information Security Office has provided. And we're going to cover a couple of these things during this presentation today, but a good part of it we're not going to. So this is more information for you about things that you need to think about. Policies and standards are things that you will probably run into in your workplace where you have requirements about what you need to do in terms of using whatever the computing infrastructure is that you have there. So I have another cartoon, and some of you have probably seen this, but we're going to take a minute on this one and give you all time to read through it. It's pretty dense. I think you can probably read it unless you're viewing off of a mobile device. But let's take a minute, and then we're going to talk about what this cartoon means. So, like I said, a very long cartoon. But primarily what they're trying to tell us, like it gets a little confusing because they talk about bits of entropy, and that really gets into complexity. And I'll talk about that in a minute as well, but it's not something you really need to be aware of that part of it. What they're showing us here is that the way that security experts have told people they need to construct passwords for the last 15 or 20 years is wrong. They told us they need to be very complex. Now, Troubadour and 3 is not especially complex because of the substitutions they did. But the idea is that they've made us put together passwords so they're hard for humans to remember. And because of that, we end up using the same password over and over again, or we make a slight variation. Maybe it would be Troubadour and 4, Troubadour and 5, that sort of thing. Or some people write it down. People will save it on their desktops in an Excel file. And so what's happening is you've got either using a very limited amount of passwords, or you're using something to remember those passwords by, which isn't secure. Now, what's interesting in here is that correct horse battery staple, which are just 4 common English words, if you put those 4 words together, it makes a really strong password. Now, I wouldn't use correct horse battery staple because this cartoon's been out there for a while, but we're going to talk about how this would work for you and why it's really good news that this cartoon's talking about. So Gibson Research Corporation has a password haystack online, and you can see the URL at the bottom of the slide. But what this does is kind of measure how strong a password is to break based on its complexity. Now, it's a little confusing because you could put in the word password and it would say it would take however much time to break it, or something very simple. So it's only really looking at complexity in terms of measuring it, not use of common passwords. So if you look at the screen, you can see it's got this brute force search space analysis, and you'll see that change as we go through the example. But down at the bottom, you're going to see time required to exhaustively search this password space, and that really means how long to break the password. And they've got a couple of scenarios, whether it's one computer online attacking you, or it's somebody has actually gotten access to your computer directly. And then they've got this massive cracking array scenario, which means there are multiple computers, potentially in something called a botnet, that are all pointed at your computer trying to break that password. So let's see what this Haystack.com, Haystack shows us here. So 6-letter password, very basic password. It's all lowercase. Now, if you look at it, you'll see in that search space analysis, it says it has 6 characters, and the search space is 26 because there are 26 different characters in our alphabet. But the more important thing is when you go look at how long it takes to break the thing, if you look especially at the second 2, because I think they're probably more relevant, your offline fast attack scenario is 0.00321 seconds. So much faster than I was even able to talk about it. So that's with 6 letters. So what we're going to do now is we're going to increase the complexity a little bit. And we're going to do that by adding a number, or substituting a number for the O, because I want to keep it the same length right now. So what you see now is that the search space depth, you've got 26 letters, you've got 10 different numeric characters that could be used. So you've got a larger amount of things for a cracking tool to search through. And we've upped it to 0.0224 seconds. So we're like 7 times more secure than we were with the first one. But obviously not very helpful at all. So what else could we do to this to make this password stronger? You can see that we've got the lowercase is checked, the digit is checked. So we're going to add a symbol. We're going to make one of the letters uppercase. And let's see what that does to it. So changing one letter to uppercase, all of a sudden we're at 0.577 seconds. Still not good, but much, much stronger than we were before. And if I make one of these letters a symbol, all of a sudden we're at 7.43 seconds. So it's far more, far stronger than the password was that we talked about initially. It's still not going to do it. Obviously, you know, a 6-character password, if they've got access to your computer, it's going to take 7 seconds roughly to break it, and hardly any time at all if they've got multiple computers that are trying to break into it. So we're going to talk about what we can do to make it stronger. I've done all the complexity things. We've got the uppercase and the lowercase and the digits and the symbols, but what I want to start doing now is I'm going to make it a little bit longer. So right now it's at 6. So we're going to go to 8. And 8's moved that up to 18.62 hours for the offline fast attack, or 1 minute with a massive cracking array scenario, which sounds really exciting and scary. We're going to go to 10 characters. Now it's gone to 19.24 years for the offline fast attack, and a week on the massive cracking array scenario. It's Let's go to 12 characters and see what happens. So by the time you get to 12 characters, even in this massive cracking array scenario, they're at 1.74 centuries to break that password. So not something we have to worry about. And 1.74 thousand centuries in terms of the offline fast attack scenario where somebody's actually got access to your computer. So what this really tells us, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, is that complexity was really important, but where we saw the biggest gains in a strong password was by making it longer. Now, if I tell people, oh, you're going to be perfectly safe, which I'll never say anyway, but if you're going to be safer using a 20-character password, it's like, you've got to be out of your mind. I am not going to do a 20-character password for every single account I've got. I know I'm supposed to have a different one for each one, but that's just way too much trouble. So let's talk about some of the options here. I'm going to talk about something called a passphrase. Now, the text I have in here starts with, "It was a dark and stormy night," which should be familiar to many of you. That comes from a couple of places. One, if you're a Peanuts fan, there's a cartoon with Snoopy as the great American writer sitting on top of his doghouse with a typewriter, and it's typed out, "It was a dark and stormy night." But it actually goes back to an Englishman, late 19th century Englishman named Bulwer Lytton. And he put together in one-sentence introduction to a novel, which I'm not reproducing here, but it went on and on and on. And it's really regarded as the worst introduction to a novel in British history. So, of course, what they did is they made a contest. And every year they have a contest where someone submits the worst possible opening to a novel, and they kind of rate it and score it, and whoever wins the trophy that year has got the worst introduction. So, fun fact sort of thing, but obviously not critical of what we're doing. So I'm going to use "It was a dark and stormy night" for my passphrase, and I'm going to turn it into something that's actually usable and would work for us in the computer age here. So I need to increase the complexity. We've got one uppercase and all lowercase letters. So I'm going to change it to "It was a dark 2:15 and stormy night," and that gives us uppercase letters, it gives us numbers, and it gives us special characters. So it gives us all of those different elements that we need. Now, what's interesting is that, as you've seen looking at the previous example with the Haystack thing, that length is really far more important than complexity when you're constructing passwords. So looking at this passphrase in that calculator, even with a massive cracking array scenario, it's at 89.14 trillion centuries to break that password. So I think we aren't going to worry about that one too much. So that's great. So now all you have to do is have a 25-character passphrase for every single account you have. I mean, how hard is that going to be? Obviously, it's not going to be a very good thing to do. So we're going to talk about something called a password manager. And I'm going to jump because I've got a poll question here, and it basically asks, do you use a password manager? And I'd like you to complete the poll while I'm talking about it here. But what a password manager does is, like it says, it manages your passwords. So the examples that we have up there, KeePass, Password Gorilla, LastPass, are all examples of different password management tools. And the way they work, and I've used LastPass for about 10 years now, the way they work is that you construct this really good passphrase kind of as your key to your vault where you're saving all these other passwords. And it will save all the passwords for you for all the websites that you go to. It will create complex passwords, which are going to be long passwords which have all of the complexity that we know we're supposed to have. And will basically provide a way for you to have a password manager on your desktop or with your browser and be able to have a different password for pretty much every single account you have online, which is the ideal thing because you don't want to use your banking password for your social media accounts, because if somebody breaks it or tricks you into giving it up, they're going to have access to your bank account. So how did we do on the poll here? Do we have any responses yet?
Yep. Closing it now.
So It looks like we've got a very small percentage of users who are currently using the password managers, and nobody said not sure, which is probably a good answer. But it's something that I haven't seen a lot of people do. When somebody told me about it, they said it's really going to revolutionize the way you use the internet, because now you can have all of these different passwords. And of course, the big question that comes up is, how do I know my passwords are safe doing something like this? Because obviously, if you use something like LastPass, it's a vault that's online, and it's storing millions and millions of different passwords, so it's going to be a big target. So what happens with this is that the passwords are stored in an encrypted format. It's a strong encryption. And yes, there's always a risk with information security. I will never tell somebody you're going to be 100% secure. We just can't ever say that. But what the trade-off has been that I've seen is this helps you use more passwords, which we know is strong, which we know is a good practice. It's stronger to do. And you've got some risk in terms of the passwords being exposed, but it hasn't happened so far. I mean, lots of people are trying to get into it. And it's the kind of thing, if it does happen, you're going to get a notification, and you'll have to change some passwords. But again, in terms of your working life, it's a lot easier to do this. So I have no stake in these password manager companies, but I do recommend one, that you take one of them at least. The next thing I want to talk about is something called multi-factor authentication. Now, I think the Google research might have called this two-factor authentication. I don't remember, but multi-factor authentication is the other way it's normally referred to. And some of you may recognize some of the symbols and some of the pictures that are on this slide. But multi-factor authentication works in the sense that normally when you log into something, you have to have something that indicates who you are and something that indicates your secret password so that you can get in. So that's, and they still only call that one factor because you're only using one thing to prove who you are. With multi-factor, you have something else. So you have this password you know, and you have something else which is used to log in. Now, with things like the Google Authenticator, which is the G, and Duo, these are online, these are actually apps for your smartphone or mobile device. And they work in conjunction with the site that you're trying to log into to make sure that when you log in to a specific website, and for RIT, we've protected our Oracle information, our MyInfo site, for those of you who have been at RIT. And to log into that now, you have to have your username, your password, and you have to interact with Duo. And it's very simple because you basically, on the screen you're logging in, it says, Duo, send me a push, or Duo, call my landline or something. And then if you've got a smartphone, it buzzes, and you say yes, and you get to log right in. Some of the other examples in here, there's a YubiKey, which is a way of storing password credentials that you plug into a computer. There's the RSA Secure ID, which is, I think, the first way they were doing this. That's a picture of one that was out. I had one 20 years ago when I was doing some consulting. But that number would change every minute, and you would have to enter that number when you logged in. The other thing on the slide there is turn it on. That gives instructions for about 100 different websites in terms of turning on two-factor authentication. And it's probably the best way to protect yourself. Again, security usually makes things a little harder to do, but it's always that trade-off between your protection and things being a bit harder. So my next question, take a minute here into the chat, is what do you think the most common way is of getting a password? What are your ideas on this? I'm going to answer Christina's question really quickly since we're in this space right now. In terms of the password managers, personally, I use LastPass. That has doubled in price over the last year. It's $24 a year for using it on your computer in unlimited mobile devices. So you're talking $2 a month for the protection. There's an open source one called KeyPass, which I know people who have used it for years. I'm not really fond of it because it's open source, and open source to me means that the documentation's terrible because it's put together by a group of programmers and they understand it. But KeyPass, LastPass, Password Gorilla, there's another new one out there that I'm not remembering right now. But I typically, what I would do is I would search Google for password vault recommendations and skip past the ones that are paid ads and, you know, look for the ones that may actually do some review on it. But the important thing is that you use one. So what did we have in terms of common ways of getting passwords? What have people entered into the chat? So just asking for it, spoofing in the sense of pretending that you're somebody else, asking for it, address, pet's name or kid's name, yes, absolutely. People love to use their pet's name as passwords. And if they're on social media, they also love to post pictures of their pets, so it's not real hard to figure out. But in general, and the other question that came up here, and I'm trying to read the chat while I'm talking, which is a mistake, but the Dashlane Password Manager is the new one that I couldn't remember what the name of it was. And I personally have not looked into that very much. But the key things that I'm seeing in here so far are they're trying to fool people into giving up their passwords. And that's by far the most effective way of doing it. There's very little risk to the attacker. They don't have to be clever. They don't have to buy tools to figure it out or to break a password like we showed earlier. The easiest thing to do is just ask for that password. Now, the nice thing about the multi-factor authentication is that even if you give up that password, because it's requiring that other piece of information, they don't have access to it. So your account is still protected. So that's why we think it's such an important thing in terms of protecting account credentials. And the other trick, of course, is people said spoofing, and I'm going to use phishing as the overall term for that in terms of people fooling you into giving up your password. The tricky part is figuring out whether something is a phish or not. And it's very easy if you don't have a PayPal account and you get an email from PayPal telling you that something's happened with your account. It's obvious it's not yours. And for years, it was very easy to tell because the grammar would frequently be absolutely terrible. And as long as you weren't in too much of a hurry, you could tell that something was wrong with the request that had come in. But essentially, those kind of problems have been taken care of because attackers can now buy kits online to do phishing attacks. And that takes care of these nice templates, making it easier to fool you with. So the rule of thumb that we have, basically, and I've got the slide one out of order, is that just don't give up your password. No one legitimate is going to ask for your password, send you an email asking for it. They don't need it to reset things. So just don't do it. So that gets this slide that I have up here now, this one on fraud, scams, and malware, gets into the other types of social engineering type attacks where they try to trick you into doing things. There's been a lot of talk, we've all seen lots of things about the election lately, about Russia attempting to do social engineering, and that has been their practice for many, many, many years. We're just like we've finally woken up to it this time. But the big deal is to trick people into doing things or to get people to do things that they wouldn't normally do. So the kinds of things that we see in terms of fraud, scams, and malware at RIT, malware is malicious software, which is usually would be in an attachment or something. But we see requests that look like they've come from the president's office asking for a copy of everybody's W-2 forms. Or can you transfer this $500,000 amount, do a wire transfer quickly, we're behind, we need to get this thing paid. And it looks like it's come from the chief financial officer requesting that somebody do that. So it's all things where they try to trick people, and it's all different types of attacks you'll see. I'm involved with a small nonprofit locally, and we have seen a steady stream of fake invoices come in, trying to trick our treasurer, and looking like it's come from the president, trying to trick the treasurer into paying something. So this is not just directed against large groups, it's pretty much directed against all of us. But again, the rule of thumb is you don't want to take the bait, don't give up your password, and this section we're going to talk about now really has to do with protecting your identity and your online safety when you're doing social media and things like that. So the newer threat that we've seen that started probably about 2 years ago, and then we're seeing more and more of it, is something called ransomware. And you can see this is a screenshot, and I think it says you have to pay $300 or $250 or something like that to get your files back. But the way ransomware works is that they trick you into installing a piece of software, malicious software, and that software goes and encrypts all of the data on your computer. And the better ones, air quotes around that, if you're connected to a network share or a portable hard drive, it will also go in and encrypt that information as well. So the problem is that once it's done that, it's too late to do anything about it. And if you're lucky, maybe your antivirus detected it before it started. Maybe you've unplugged your computer really quickly and it didn't get very far into it, or you still have to figure out what's going to happen when you plug it back in. But the key thing with it, again, is that once you've been attacked, it's too late. And you would have seen things in the last year or two about police departments who've had all their data encrypted, have had to pay large amounts of money. Pretty much a large healthcare system in the United Kingdom was attacked a year ago, and I believe paid somewhere in the millions of pounds to get their data get their data unlocked again. So the real issue is, how do you protect against something like this? You have to protect against it ahead of time. You have to back up your data. And we are all lazy about this sort of thing, and it's all like, oh, we know it'll be okay, and we know our hard drive might crash sometime, but of course we're going to get some kind of warning that it's going to happen, which of course doesn't happen. And even online accounts like Dropbox and things like that, some of this ransomware is sophisticated enough to reach up into those accounts and encrypt it also. So best rule of thumb with protecting yourself against ransomware is making sure you have a copy of your data. And that means regular backups, and it means not just having a portable hard drive connected to your computer where you copy files over. You actually need to, use some kind of a program for it. But so ransomware is probably the scariest, or one of the scarier things that we've had come down the line in the last year. Now, at this point in time, I usually pop up this slide, and some of my audience, I'm sure, is old enough to remember this, but these are the old duck and cover drills where everybody hid under their seats to protect ourselves from atomic bombs, which obviously wasn't going to do any good, but it made us feel like we were doing something. But a lot of the time I'll get to this point, and I've got a lot of people in the audience who look like deer in the headlights. So I want to talk about some of the things you can actually do to protect yourself rather than telling you all of the bad things that can happen. Again, the number one thing is don't get hooked. Just never respond to email requests or phone calls or text messages or anything else that are asking for your password. That's an easy one. If we just did that, we'd be in great shape. The other question I've got as we launch into this is, I'm assuming most of you have mobile devices, smartphones, or tablets of some kind or other. The question I have for you, I think we have a question on this, yes, is do you have a mobile security app on your phone? I mean, if you do, please, I'm going to say a poll, or this was a yes, no. Okay, so it's a poll. So please answer the poll. And I'm interested in seeing what the responses are in here, because I know how it usually goes when I'm doing this as a live in-person class. So it's not looking too good for the yes at this point, though someone has it, 2 people. So here's part of the issue we have, and all of you know this, especially if you're iPhone users, and I don't want to bash Apple on this, but Apple has never made it, what they've done is make things easier for users, and they've given a very nice interface. They don't talk about security very much. And iPhones can be attacked, and Androids can be attacked, and pretty much any of the operating systems that are out there on smartphones and tablets and things like that. So the list that's here is just kind of a short list of some things that are built in, like to Find My iPhone, but some things are actually apps that you can add from your marketplace or your Google Play Store, depending on what you're using. And they provide additional security. They'll scan the applications that you're trying to install. They'll make sure they're okay. They'll tell you if they've got weird permissions they're asking for, you know, if they're asking to be able to do things more often than not. So, again, I encourage you to research various, you know, just do your Google search of mobile security apps for whatever kind of device you have and see what the recommendations are. But you'll find that that will secure things. And the reason this is so important, I think most of us are aware that over the last several years there have been far more smartphones and iPad things and tablets sold than there have been regular computers. And what that means for the cyber criminal who's out there trying to trick us and get our money, they're going to go after those mobile devices. That's where people are. That's where they're going to invest their money. And they're not as easy to protect. One of the questions I typically ask in the class is, how do you tell where a link goes to on a mobile device? And we're not going to ask it as a question now, but what happens is you can't hover your cursor over it like you would on a computer. You can't really hover your finger over it either. And if you just touch the link, it takes you there. If you want to find out where it goes, you actually have to push down on the link with your finger and hold it down until it shows you where it goes. And that is not a good design. Obviously, if you let up on your finger too soon, it's taking you to that link. So this is one of the reasons I think that mobile devices are attacked so much, because they're just harder for us to even think about defending. Now, what's interesting is that Google question that came out really early, where the most important thing to do was to install software updates. We do that on our phones. We know we need to do that on our phones. We get them daily for all of these different apps. So it's the same kind of idea with your computers. You want to make sure things are kept up to date. So we'll talk about a few other things here about protecting your information. Great drawing created by a student who worked in our office at one point in time, and it's a good illustration of what's out there, because something may appear to be a sheep, but it's really a wolf in the background, and you cannot tell by what you see online. You just cannot tell. So friend requests from somebody, hey, they look like great, who knows what they're really like. And it's not saying that criminals couldn't look great either, for that matter. So my number one rule of thumb is that we can never assume privacy. Whatever we share online, we have to assume at some point it's going to get revealed. Now, it's frustrating because we don't have a lot of control over that. We had no control over what happened with Equifax, with them revealing all of those passwords, or Yahoo, who I think they revealed 2 billion passwords, which they had 2 billion passwords. They pretty much revealed every single account password they had. We have very little control over that. But we do have control over the types of information we choose to share, and that really comes more into social media. A lot of the time, you'll sign up for Facebook or some other social media account. It'll ask for your birthday. It may ask for your hometown. It may ask for where you went to school. You can provide that information, but you need to think about the types of information it's asking for and make sure that it's something you are comfortable with providing. But again, even if it says it's secure and private, you've got to assume at some point it'll be revealed. The next screen, which is probably not readable, is privacy settings. It's actually from my Facebook account. And what was interesting about this is when I went down and I looked at who can look me up, and the second thing on there said, who can look you up using the phone number you provided, and it said everyone. I never remember giving Facebook permission to do that. So that must have been a default setting. And what I recommend is that every few months, go into your privacy settings in these different social media accounts. Make sure that nothing has changed, and make sure that they're all settings that you're comfortable with, and change them now if you're not comfortable with them. Do what you can to protect your information. Now, some things that they also provide that are good are login alerts, which you can sign up for with various social media accounts. I was speaking at a conference in New England in the fall, and while I was there, I got 6 or 7 messages from Facebook that somebody was trying to log into my account. And it knew it wasn't coming from me because it was a different, actually I think they were coming from Australia of all places, but it alerted me that that was happening, which was a little discomforting, but it also told me I didn't need to change the password. But the good news about this is that when you log into Facebook and say you log into it from out of town, you'll get one of these alerts because you're not coming from the internet, the IP address, the regular address that you are connecting from, and it will let you know. A couple of other tips here. Use something called Google Alerts that you can set up. You can monitor use of your name. You can put in your email address, and anytime that appears online in this place that Google indexes, it will give you a report on that. And you can aggregate it so you maybe get it once a day. You can also use this alert to follow various subjects, sports teams, all sorts of things like that as well. So it's got some things, it's got some play value also. Google also has a My Account dashboard. If you're a Gmail user, which is probably 90% of the world, at least at this point, one thing you can do is go to My Account dashboard, and it will allow you to do a security checkup and a privacy checkup. I encourage you to do that again just so you know what you're sharing. You'll also see right below privacy checkup, it says My Activity. So it will give you an idea of what activity has been associated with your account. And if there are things on there that you haven't been doing, then that account has been hacked at some point. Another nice trick, which somebody told me about, is doing something called a Google reverse image search. Now, I don't know how many of you all use LinkedIn. I'm a fairly heavy LinkedIn user, and I will connect with pretty much anybody unless it looks really bizarre. But what happens is that there are fake accounts on LinkedIn, like there are fake accounts on Facebook and other places. And what the Google reverse image search allows you to do is to select the image, depending on whether you've got Chrome or not, right-click on the image and then choose Search Google for the image, and it will show you all the places that image is used. So I got a connection request from probably one of these people on the right here, but that same picture was used with at least 4 different LinkedIn accounts. So it's a generic picture, or maybe it's one of those people, but it's a good way to check and see, is this image one that's commonly used on the internet and they're just using it for a fake account. And they want a fake account and get you to connect because they want to get over to your connections. So another issue, and again, it's not typically an issue with faculty, staff, or probably the audience I have today. You want to protect your reputation. Your online image is your online brand. People are going to make judgments about you based on what they see about you online. This example here is from a poster from the University of Wisconsin, and would you hire this guy? And somebody's told me at one point they think that could be milk. I'm not buying it. But the idea, again, is that understand that whatever you do online, people are going to make decisions about you and make judgments about you. So that is the presentation. And I'm going to pop up my next, which is my website while we're talking here. But what questions do you all have? And thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Ben. There are a couple coming in. So if you have additional questions, folks, please send them in through the chat box. A couple things that have come up. What if you do not put your portable hardware drive online? Will the ransomware still attack it?
As long as the portable hardware drive is connected to your computer, yes. Depending on the strain of ransomware, it will go into everything you're connected to. So the idea, if I was using a portable drive for backups, I would back up and then I would unplug it. And then I'd plug it back in again when I'm going to use it as, back up to it again. Typically, my experience, we use those as additional space and not backup space. We really need to think of it as an opportunity to back it up. And again, back it up and just disconnect it. And it's not going to jump into it if it's not connected.
Okay. Question from Pete. What's an example of a mobile security app?
So depending on your phone and depending on how old it is, you will kind of dictate what you really need. So one example of a mobile security app is something called LastPass. And not LastPass, I got that wrong. What is it? Lookout, sorry. It's called Lookout. Lookout, what it does is you install it from your app store and it scans all of the applications that you install. to make sure there's nothing malicious in them, or whether they're asking for weird permissions like why do they need access to your camera, that sort of thing. Lookout also has the built-in thing that iPhone users have enjoyed where you can find your phone through Lookout. And what you can do is you can bring up a map and it'll show you where your phone is within 75 feet, I think it is. And you can also get it to have your phone emit a high-pitched squeal noise. So that will help a lot in terms of trying to find it. But the main thing it does is it looks at your applications and makes sure that none of those are malicious. And they do sneak out there occasionally where they are bad. I used a program by Sophos, S-O-P-H-O-S, for my smartphone. And it was very aggressive in terms of what it would warn me about. And it started talking about low reputation applications. And it told me Google Play was a low reputation application and a bunch of other things. So it was probably a little bit too hypersensitive, so I had to kind of turn those notifications down some. But the idea is it's a third-party application that you would add to your smartphone or other mobile device. Sorry, very long answer to a short question.
That's okay, thank you. Adam has a question. What is the best way to implement a safe home network where my spouse and I can count on safe, robust backups that can be automated by software? And then what software might that be? Yeah, I think this is probably question a little bit beyond the scope of what I was prepared to talk about today. But in general, you want to use a router. And some of the, trying to remember whether our router does this or not. I've got what they call a cloud drive, which essentially allows me to back up to it in the house. I've got the system set up to back up to it, and then it will back up that data to the cloud. And I do not remember what the cost is per gigabyte or whatever of storage, but storage prices are going down and down. But ideally what you do to protect your data is you get a copy of it and you have that copy somewhere besides where the computers are located. Because if there should be a break-in or fire or anything else, you don't want to have lost every bit of digital information you have. We've become too dependent on it. All right. Question that came in from, I don't know, who'd that come in from? Jim? Is there value to use the traditional antivirus software that works on a mobile device? Yeah, so when I'm talking about a mobile security app, they will have antivirus built in. Cybercriminals are still crafting malicious software to attack phones. There was a banking Trojan a couple of years ago, which is still out there, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but what the Trojan part means, it's just like the Trojan horse. It looked like it was something else, but there was a banking Trojan, and what it did was capture all of your banking activity that you did online. Didn't worry about anything else you were doing, but anytime you went to a bank, it would capture that information and send it out to somebody. So yeah, the antivirus, I think what you'll find, I'm not sure you can get strictly an antivirus for your phone at this point. They'll all be more robust security suites of software. And the good news is that most of them are free, or at least have free versions. And the reason for that is that it helps all of us to get this security software out in the marketplace because it reduces the amount of attacks that go on. Thank you. Another question came in from Adam. Do you know if Mint.com is a safe third-party app for banking management? It's not anything I've used, but again, my rule of thumb on this is I will look, one, I'll get an idea of how many people are using it if I can, but I'll also look online for reviews of it. I'm not aware of any breaches, which is what they would call the release of the private information with Mint.com, but I think they may be associated with Intuit, which has TurboTax, and there have been occasional problems with that. But I'm a TurboTax user myself, so I haven't worried about that. The biggest issue, honestly, is people asking for passwords and people giving them up. In terms of the Verizon Security and Privacy app, I'm not familiar with it. I tend not to use, I have Verizon, but I tend not to use their built-in stuff. I don't like it. It takes up room that I'd rather use for something else. But in general, I'm going to give you the same response.
do a Google search and look for reviews and see what they have to say about it. And that's, unfortunately, it's going to be pretty much my response to any specific security app or software question today, because it changes. It changes monthly, depending on which one is more effective.
So if I've got malware on my device, what do I do?
Take it to somebody to look at. If you're associated, and I can't tell you exactly who to take it to look at. If you're around RIT in the community, I think you could probably go to the Digital Den and ask them for their recommendations on it. Worst case, you just reset the device and wipe it and return it to factory specs, and that should take care of any malware that's on the device.
Okay, here's a question that came in about looking for advice for parents to communicate to young adults and students about not sharing their personal online ID if they are more comfortable in doing so. Any thoughts for frustrated parents out there?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. One, parents don't tend to use the same applications that their kids do, and I think that's deliberate on the part of the kids. But they'll tend to use things like Snapchat, which is supposed to be this very brief period of time a picture is available or something like that. But people can take a screenshot of it. They can take a picture of the device that the picture came in on. There have also been cases where it's like, oh, oops, somebody broke into the Snapchat servers and they found all this information that was supposed to be really ephemeral. The best place I would tell you to look, though, is to go to a website called Stay Safe Online. And it's a government website that's set up, and it has a whole section on parents and teens and preteens and what kind of information to share with them. I think that will be your best option, is to start with Stay Safe Online.
All right, thank you. Are there any additional questions? If not, we're putting that website for Stay Safe Online into the chat box. So I guess if there are no additional questions, we will wrap up. So thanks to Ben for coming back and being a presenter for the second time. If you do have additional questions, you can email them to ritalum@rit.edu or tweet them to @RIT_alumni with the hashtag #MeRITWebinars. And we will get you some answers from our panelists from today. As a reminder, all of you will receive an email from us in the next few days with a link to today's webinar recording. Ben, can't thank you enough for being our presenter today, and thanks to all of you out there for participating in today's webinar. Our next webinar is Thursday, March 8th, called Build a Better Brand from the Office of Career Services with Chris Steeler. Look for your special invitation in your email coming shortly. Again, thanks to everyone for joining. You can exit this webinar by simply closing the WebEx window. And please do let us know what you thought of the webinar today by taking the very brief survey, which pops up when you exit. Thanks again all, and have a great rest of the day.